Hi everyone, Sarah Pacaro, rapid transformational therapist, and I talk a lot about having been with toxic and unhealthy people in your adult life. Well, today we're going to talk about where this stems from, where this comes from, and some common characteristics that you will notice if you have been in a toxic relationship as an adult. So today's topic is about your childhood emotional neglect, or what's called a CEN, and things that you will most commonly say as an adult if you've experienced this. And I say that I had a really good childhood. I had a normal childhood. My parents were great and they supported me and provided for me. But childhood emotional neglect is something that I learned about as an adult when doing a lot of research to answer the question of why I ended up with narcissists, why I ended up in toxic relationships. And childhood emotional neglect is often this like normal experience that you have in so many homes. It impacts every child. You don't make it through adulthood without having scars from your childhood. It's a very powerful process, one that leaves its marks on the child, much like when you talk about healing a wound, you have a scar left, and you don't often recognize it or really connect and put together the dots of how it leads to choices in every aspect of your life when you are an adult. And oftentimes, many people I work with, like my experience, I couldn't really pinpoint one specific thing that went wrong or what happened or how I ended up in this situation. So it's kind of like this compounding problem that's really strong. The likelihood that this child that was emotionally neglected, oftentimes not intentionally on purpose, now as an adult has that same belief and that feeling that I don't remember. I don't really remember what went wrong. I just can't quite figure it out. So, childhood emotional neglect, or CEN, happens when your parents fail to notice you or to respond enough to your emotions and needs as they raise you. And I'm a parent, and if you're a parent, you know sometimes you're just exhausted and you just don't have the time or energy. You're trying to keep the house together in whatever way possible. If you are in a toxic and unhealthy relationship, you're trying to quiet that person so that the household can just be as calm as possible, as good as, like, you're just trying to keep it together. And in that, you often don't have the time, energy, or resources to meet your child's emotional needs. And this is what happens in childhood, and then later on as adulthood, this has a big impact. So it's not always these big dramatic failures. It sometimes is often very subtle things, very unnoticeable things, very unmemorable experiences of failure, which no one is aware. It's not like when your child falls down and is screaming and bleeding and you're like, oh, they need my attention now. Sometimes it's very subtle things. So in many families, the parents simply fail to notice that their child is having a feeling. Maybe they get sent to timeout, or the child goes to their room and just feels isolated, alone, and feels like there's nothing that they can do to change this. So their feelings feel invalidated. Many times the parent is so busy or doesn't even notice that they failed to ask the child about their feelings. Not necessarily like all the time, but the kid will say, "Oh, I'm good." And they feel that they are to be seen and not heard, and don't feel that they have the right to use their voice to speak up. This is most often what comes out when I work with people, and was my experience too. So believe it or not, every experience of childhood leaves a mark on a child, and now you are just a bigger child. You're an adult. So there's a variety of different childhood emotional neglect in all kinds of families. It's infinite. It can be something warm, cold. It can be, whether you were angry or depressed or you're frustrated. Maybe you came from a single parent. Maybe they got out of this really bad environment and they got divorced and they left. And now they're working two jobs, or they were working so often that they were simply never home. And that made you feel that you weren't worth being home for. You didn't have your emotional needs matter. Or maybe you had to stay at home mom or dad. Really none of those things that matter. All that matters is that your parents did not notice, ask, or respond to your feelings enough. And this leaves you with this deeply rooted belief in your core that you are not enough or you're not worth it. So every family experience is different, and it can look very different from the outside, and much of them appear to have nothing in common. I get that asked a lot. Well, my experience is different, but the core belief that you have about yourself is the same because we're all humans. So on the inside, we have all of these things in common. But we're going to talk about 10 characteristics of people who have grown up with childhood emotional neglect, the things that we all have in common, because it becomes so woven into this sense of yourself that everyone feels this way. So here are the 10 most common things that children who grew up with childhood emotional neglect will feel. You feel this feeling of emptiness inside, this feeling of counterdependence or codependence. You depend on someone or something else outside of you to feel happy. And often that's what keeps us stuck in these toxic relationships. You have a lack of self-knowledge, poor compassion for yourself. People pleasers, raise your hands. You put everyone else's needs before yours. You have a tendency to lean towards guilt and towards shame. You have this self-directed anger and blame. You feel so angry at yourself, you feel guilty, and you blame yourself for almost everything. This deep sense of being flawed or feeling different from everybody else, and then you don't feel like you fit in. You feel isolated. Obviously, that leads to this feeling of loneliness inside. And then you struggle with self-care. Maybe it's going for a walk or exercising when you know you should, or eating healthy things, making healthy choices, even having healthy thoughts. Something as simple as like losing your keys and going, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I always do that. Even something as simple as that. Or you struggle with self-discipline. Maybe, no one's perfect and going on diet doesn't work, but you want to reduce your weight, you want to lose weight. Don't ever say lose, because that's associated towards pain, and your mind will take you away from pain. That's why diets don't work. If you want to reduce or slim, but maybe it's with self-discipline. You started this new diet and you're like, I'm not going to eat a cookie. But then you walk by a bakery and you go, oh my God, just one. What's one going to hurt? There's so many different ways that this shows up in your life. You have difficulty identifying, you have difficulty naming emotions, understanding how emotions work and what they're there to teach you about yourself and others, and then have difficulty expressing those or setting boundaries around those that make you feel certain emotions, or like anger, frustration. You let people walk all over you. So back to how you got this way. You grew up with parents who ignored your feelings. Not intentionally. So many people had good parents, loving parents, parents who tried everything, who did provide a really, the best environment that they could. And you realized about yourself at a very young age that your emotions were not welcome in your home. It was not okay for you to feel the way that you felt. So how did you cope? Well, your brain knew, as it always does, your brain knows exactly what to do. It takes you towards pleasure and away from pain. So when you're feeling these hurtful, painful feelings, it blocks them off. It says, oh, I'm fine. When your parent, realizes you're crying and is like, what's wrong? Nothing. And you wipe away your tears. Nothing's wrong, I'm fine. Instead, you ignored your feelings, you squelched them, and you hurt. You internalized, pushed down that sadness because you didn't want to bother your parents. You didn't want to bother your parents, and you wanted to be happy, so you wiped it away and you said, nothing, I'm fine. And now, as an adult, you find that you are living with your feelings kind of on the other side of that wall that you push them down. All those feelings, those emotions are suppressed, repressed, which leads to depression, and you've blocked them off, but you can still feel them, you can still sense them. So somewhere deep down in your gut, oftentimes that's our intuition, that gut feeling, you feel that something is not right. Something is missing. And this makes you feel empty, it makes you feel different from other people, and it makes you feel somehow deeply, deeply flawed. So in the past, you went to your parents for emotional support and validation, just like every child did, and you often walked away with a painful experience, feeling empty-handed and feeling alone. You walked away not having the space held to, I mean, children don't know. You have to get taught. You have to have space held for you. You have to get taught of how to do this. So it's now, as an adult, really difficult or hard for you to ask anyone anything, because you have that same sense, that same deep gut feeling that they won't be met. Those emotional needs won't be met like the way they weren't in childhood. So you're afraid to trust anyone else. You're afraid to expect support or help from anybody else. And so oftentimes as an adult, this leads to success because you think, I've got this, I'm going to do it on my own. But because you grew up with very little awareness of your emotions, now you're uncomfortable with those really strong feelings. And anytime those feelings arise in yourself, you do your best to avoid those feelings altogether. And if you can't feel those, you can't feel the opposite. You can't feel those happy, positive feelings. So we oftentimes just feel stuck and lost because we can't feel any feelings. We feel numb. We feel like we're a shell of ourselves because you feel flawed, you feel empty, you feel alone, you feel out of touch with your feelings. It feels really difficult to feel that you truly belong anywhere. And it's hard to know what you want. So many people I connect with, and I ask them, that's the first thing that we talk about is, okay, all of this experiences you've had, what do you want? And the most common answer I get is, I don't even know. I don't know. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I feel. I don't know what I need. Because it's hard to believe after you've experienced this over and over and over again that what you want truly matters. It's really difficult. It's hard to feel that you matter. So I'm going to read some statements, and I want you to think about these. Think about how often you say them. Think about how often you feel them. And don't be alarmed or discouraged, because there are answers and solutions to this problem. This is what I work with people through, is really connecting back to your childhood. This is what I mean when I say healing from within and going back to those subconscious beliefs that you have about yourself based upon these past experiences. Well, yes, the past experience can be with a toxic and unhealthy person. Oftentimes it's much, much further than that. When we get to the root and the core, it's where you first had this experience, because that was the most deep, most impactful time. And then it just adds, every experience you have after that that leads to that same feeling gets pushed further and further and further. When we get to the root, we get to the very bottom of it. So we can reverse it from the inside out. That's exactly what we do working together, and it changes your view of yourself, thus changing your life and your trajectory of it forever. So here are some common phrases that people who've experienced childhood emotional neglect often say. The first one is, hey, I don't want to intrude, because you feel that you're a bother. So that's the first common one. I don't want to intrude, or I don't need any help. I'm good. I've got it. Or you're going somewhere. Maybe you're out to dinner or you're with a friend, and they say, well, what do you want? Oh, I don't know. Whatever you want. Whatever you want's fine with me. Or, if someone asks you, well, what do you think? And you're like, oh, whatever. And you smile. And you feel like you don't have anything to say. Or I don't feel anything. I don't know. Or I'm sorry. I'm sorry is a big one. You're apologizing. What are you apologizing for? You didn't do anything wrong. Maybe it's something as simple as like opening the door and someone's there, oh, I'm sorry. Instead of, excuse me. Why are you sorry for opening the door? But you notice you apologize. You say, I'm sorry. Or you tell yourself, I'm lazy. Or you ask, what's the point? Or, no, I don't need anything. Good. Or, oh, it doesn't matter to me. Yes, it does. It matters to you, but you've been so disassociated with that feeling, so you'll say, oh, it doesn't matter, or no, I don't need anyone, or you often blame yourself and you say, it's my fault, or I don't know how I feel. If someone asks you how you feel, I don't know how I feel, or oh, I've got this, I've got it, I can do it on my own, no worries, or I can handle it. Or you'll tell yourself, I'm not smart, I'm not as attractive, I'm not as capable of other people. You'll be out and the thoughts that you have while you see other people when you're out are that you're not as pretty, you're not as smart, you're not as talented, you're not as capable of them. And so you self-sabotage, you hold yourself back from really going after what it is that you want. Or you feel like, I don't fit in anywhere. why can't you just be happy? I don't know. And you'll have that thought and that feeling of I should just stop feeling this way. I shouldn't feel this way, or I don't know what I want. So there are so many comments or remarks. I mean, they're countless, and the startling reality is that they often feel very, very true for you. So in order to move towards that and start believing in yourself, you've got to start listening to yourself, listening to and tuning into those feelings that you've pushed down for far too long, of the anger, the resentment, the rejection, the betrayal, the abandonment. All of those things are what we get into working together. Feeling your feelings, because you can't heal what you can't feel. And really learning about this and getting on a path to recovery is about connecting to those experiences that you had that led you to this. And oftentimes, like I said, it's not, sometimes it is extremely traumatic, but you know about those. It's often those little subtle things that you don't know about. So I hope that this video has been helpful for you. I love the inner childhood work, and I love getting people to that, because that is where happiness is. You had it, and anything you had, you acquired, you can now move towards after you remove the blocks that are keeping you from feeling that now in your adult life. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Please reach out and connect with me. I would love to chat with you if this is what you're going through and what you're experiencing. So I hope this has been helpful. So please like, love, comment, share, and look forward to connecting.